Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And this is what I call my morning musings. I'm sitting here watching a video by Dr. William Lane Craig. And as you know, if you've been watching this series, I've been responding to his objections to the preterist view of eschatology. And I must confess that I've just been staggered as I watch his videos in his explanation or his attempt to explain away the time statements of Scripture, of the overwhelming sense of imminence that we find in the New Testament. And his key argument, and you can find his videos on YouTube. It's under reasonablefaith.org. This is video number 7. He has what he calls an argument entitled Contextual Ambiguity. And he says that the New Testament writers give us purposely the false impression of the imminence of the coming of the Lord. And he says that Matthew gave the impression of imminence, but we know that Matthew did not believe the impression that he gave, commenting, for instance, on Matthew 10, 22 and 23, Matthew 16, 27 and 28. So Dr. Craig is arguing that if we read Matthew, who is exercising editorial comment on the parallel passages in the book of Mark, that if we read Matthew, Matthew's account gives the false impression of imminence, but we know that Matthew did not believe what he wrote that gave the false impression. I must confess, as I stated, I'm absolutely staggered. Dr. William Lane Craig would never make this argument in regard to, for instance, the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Would he argue that when we read the gospel accounts, that although he would certainly acknowledge that the different authors give us different insights into the event of the resurrection, that they give false impressions, that they give us false evidence? He would not argue this way in a debate with an atheist rejecting the resurrection of Jesus and the atheist arguing, well, Matthew's evidence is faulty. It gives the wrong impression. It gives the false impression. Dr. Craig would never argue that way. How can we trust the evidence of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in regard to the testimony of the resurrection of Jesus if we're then going to turn around and say we cannot trust the evidence of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in regard to the timing of the parousia? To say that the editorial liberty, a term that Dr. Craig uses, to say that the New Testament writers exercised editorial liberty and gave false impressions about the imminence of the coming of the Lord? It seems to me that this calls the very inspiration of Scripture into question. In other words, we're supposed to believe that over here Matthew in chapter 10, Matthew 16, Matthew chapter 24 gave an impression of the imminence of the Lord that he himself did not believe. Are we supposed to believe that Matthew was that bad of an author? Matthew did not realize that when he penned those words, the readers were going to read that and say, well, you know what? They're going to get the impression that the coming of the Lord is going to happen in this generation, and well, I know that's not true, but I'm going to let them get that impression anyway, even though I know that's a false impression. What kind of an argument is this? What does this say about inspiration of Scripture? Well, we've got more to say about Dr. William Lane Craig's arguments about editorial liberty and contextual ambiguity when it comes to the time statements of Scripture. In the meantime, you need to get a copy of my book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, The Wedding of the King of Kings, in which, for instance, I discuss the imminence of the parousia as found in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, how it cannot be lightly dismissed. You cannot argue it away by saying, oh, well, Paul was using the editorial we. No, it's objective imminence. It demands that we see and that we honor the language of imminence that Paul was saying Christ was coming back in the first century. Go to my website, www.eschatology.org, BibleProphecy.com, order the book, say that you mention that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. Thanks for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. We'll have more. See you on the flip side.